iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio, and FS1. Couple of minutes, Greg Cosell joins us. Joy Taylor is joining me. You know, I saw something. You and I have had Jay Glazer on before.
Yes.
And, you know, Jay knows his stuff. And when Jay says something, you know, a lot of guys out there talking NFL, they don't know what they're talking about. When Jay Glazer says something, he doesn't talk a lot. It generally has got a beat on it. So he writes for The Athletic now, which is a subscription-based, service for sports writers and stuff. And Glazer was on there, and he had like a mailbag segment. And he said, he goes, I have nothing to base this on besides a gut feeling. I can see it happening this year. I can see it being Brady steps away before Drew Brees. This is one of the ones I strongly disagree, and I'll tell you why. If you were thinking about retirement, now I know a lot of you are watching me, you're 18, you're 28, you're 38, you're 48, you're not talking about retirement. But if you're 55, 65 years old and watching me and you're thinking about retirement, generally the thing that gets you out the door faster is the job's harder. If the job's easier, you'll stick around for a couple of years. I mean, at this job, I'll do this job for a long time as long as they'll keep me. But if it gets to a point where we're cutting back on staffing and there's more demands, that's when you're like, yeah, I've done my stuff. I'm going to go hang out at the beach. Just think about this between Brady and Brees. Tom Brady's in a division with Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, and Ryan Tannehill. That's an easier division to win games than facing Cam Newton twice, Matt Ryan twice. And by the way, Jameis Winston with Bruce Arians, that's going to be the best Jameis Winston. I don't know how good it's going to be, but it's going to be the best Jameis Winston. Advantage Brady. It's easier. How about this? Brady and New England have 12 draft picks. They could return all 5 offensive linemen, guaranteed 4. They're fairly young. He gets great protection. The team is getting younger. Gronk's retiring. They'll have cap space. Or Drew Brees. They have no cap space. They don't have a first, a third, or a fourth-round pick. They gave them all up. They were all in this year. Good luck improving. Here's another thing. Brees looked very tired at the end of the year. Last 6 games, 7 touchdowns, 5 picks. Tom Brady's best game of the year, I thought it was against the Chargers. And he was damn good against Kansas City late. Think about this. The Saints, the last 2 years, their season has ended on a wildly emotional loss. The controversy against the Rams, that inexplicable loss to the Vikings. It is hard to overcome bizarrely strange emotional losses. The last 3 years, there have been 12 teams that have made the conference championships, AFC, NFC. Half did not make the playoffs the following year. Saints, no cap space, no first, third, fourth. Brees looked tired at the end of the year. Emotional losses last 2 years. Tougher division. When you're talking about retirement, the easier your life is, the easier your job is, the younger the teammates. I think Brady, I can see himself talking himself in saying, we got 12 new draft picks. I'm around a bunch of young guys. As long as the offensive line's set for Brady, he tends to be a happy camper. As long as he's not taking hits, he's a happy camper. I think Brady is sticking around longer than Brees. I think the last 2 years for the Saints, those emotional losses, I don't know how many of those you can withstand. I do not know how many. The 2 toughest losses in the NFL the last 2 years, both been to the Saints. Those are brutal beatdowns. That loss to the Vikings and that loss to the Rams. And with that, one of our favorite guests, over 30 years at NFL Films, as objective as anybody that joins me every week, Greg Cosell. Greg, how are you this morning?
Colin, I'm doing great. How you doing?
Well, I got to tell you, when I watched, I felt strongly that I liked Kansas City this weekend, and I sat there with my jaw dropped watching the dominance and ball control of New England in the first half. And I sat to myself and I thought, all year I kept saying, I don't like their weapons, they're not dynamic. And then I watched them against the Chargers and the Chiefs, and I'm like, am I wrong? Is Edelman, Sony Michel, James White, maybe they're a little more dynamic than I give them credit for?
Well, the last 2 games, the 2 playoff wins, they essentially came out in the first half, Colin, running the ball. Sony Michel had 16 carries in the first half alone versus the Chargers and 19 carries in the first half alone versus the Chiefs. In fact, that first long drive against the Chiefs, they had 6 first and 10 runs. Okay, and all 6 were totally different runs. They have evolved into a team that is so multiple and so diverse with their run game. They run out of 21 personnel with a fullback on the field. They run out of 11 personnel. It's really, I'm sure for offensive line coaches, it's such a fun run game to watch.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because when you watch Kansas City, I mean, they basically took Tyreek Hill out of the game, and Travis Kelce did not have great influence. So that tells me New England did what they always do, which I didn't think was possible against an Andy Reid team. Did you feel like New England simply won the coaching battle here?
To some degree, yes, because here was the Patriots' approach. It was actually, the beauty was in its simplicity. What they did is they took their worst corner, either Jones or Crossan, and put him on Hill with Devin McCourty with a dedicated double team over the top. So Hill was doubled on almost every play. They took a corner, the rookie Jackson, and put him on Kelce. But the bottom line was everybody else, because McCourty was occupied as part of the dedicated double on Hill, everybody else was playing man-to-man coverage with no help at all. So in that framework, Hill was a non-factor and Kelce was a non-factor.
And by the way, for young quarterbacks, you know, I've seen this Carson Wentz and Zach Ertz. Sometimes young quarterbacks have a favorite target. And, I mean, if you take out Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce from Mahomes, and he was so good with each, is it possible that he pats the ball, he waits too long, they're not open, he became and therefore that extra step gave New England's pass rush just enough they needed to get to him.
And the thing is, playing defense the way they did, they pretty much had 5 to work in the pass rush, and they did that really effectively with stunts up front and caused some pressure. But the thing, when you watch that game, and when I watched it on tape, there were a few plays in the second half that were really well designed by Andy Reid to attack the coverage that he was getting, but there were very few of those plays. The big plays, the majority of them came with Mahomes making those second reaction improvisational plays, which he's outstanding at. We know that, but I still believe it's very hard to live off that. Now, I know people will say they scored 31 points, and they did, but it was not a really consistent game for the Chiefs offense in any way.
Rams Saints. I think the Rams present a little bit of a dilemma for New England in this, that early in the year they were very Todd Gurley dependent. Now they're not. Cooper Kupp has always been, it feels like, Goff's favorite target. He's no longer there. They had 6 different guys with over 50 targets. Josh Reynolds has ended up being a very nice player. They've got 2 backs, 2 tight ends, Brandon Cooks. I don't think there's a guy that you can just take away, not a Travis Kelce. Do they present a little bit of an issue that they spread the ball around a little, so you got to they kind of throw to the open guy?
Well, they're very scheme-based. It's an offense that's built on scheme more than people. Now, obviously, if you're going to play man-to-man against them, which my guess is the Patriots will, that's been their track record, then receivers do have to win one-on-one. We've seen Cooks able to do that throughout the year. I think Robert Woods is a very underrated receiver. Yeah. I'm sure he's not underrated by the Patriots and by coaches around the league. I'm just talking from a media perspective. But the other point I'd like to make, and we'll talk about this more next week, it would not surprise me to see the Patriots maybe play a little more zone for this reason, in that you want Goff to be able to have to read it out. I think in some ways it's a very schemed offense. He's somewhat programmed, and that's not a bad thing. People take that word to be, a bad thing. It's really well defined for him because they do such a good job in their design, and we'll get to that when we get to our play, and I'll show you that. But, sometimes with a quarterback, you want him to have to read it out just a little bit more, and zone presents that normally more so than man. I almost never pick against the Saints in a playoff game at home. I did pick the Rams, and one of the reasons I did is I kept going back to what you had said about Brees. I thought you were ahead of the country on this. Is they were a lot less flash than you think of the Saints. They became a little dink and dunk. I think Brees had almost a little arm fatigue late. I thought Goff outplayed Brees late. Now, I love Drew, but this is a team that doesn't have a first, a third, or a fourth, no cap space. I thought at the end of the year, frankly, Greg,
the Saints offense was not a big asset. I thought it was very pedestrian.
I would agree. And we talked about this, and you know me, Colin. I'm just looking at the tape. Nothing I say is personal. And I thought over the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season, I thought that Brees was not as sharp. I thought that he was uncharacteristically inaccurate at times. And when I say inaccurate, it's not scattershot, just his ball placement wasn't as precise, and that has been a major part of his game over the years. I thought he left some throws on the field at times by not turning it loose. And the one thing they could not count on this year that they had a year ago, they did not have a consistent week-to-week run game to help bail them out.
It is interesting as you break down, Belichick's background is defense. He's the defense. Yes. He takes average defensive guys and elevates them. And McVay takes good offense. I mean, Robert Woods was always a good, nice player in Buffalo. He's been a really, really good player in L.A. Yep. He takes offensive players like Goff and elevates them. So it's kind of a generational battle. The old wizard, the iconic Belichick defensive mind against McVay, who's known as a brilliant offensive mind. To me, it feels like we'll get a real chess match, which I love that part of football. You watch that part of football. Yeah. I think we've got a real matchup issue. I don't see a wild, high-scoring game. I see chess match, chess match, chess match.
Well, I'm fascinated to see Belichick's defense versus the Rams' offense, because the Rams are very